Well, hello and welcome to Garden Wise. My name is Marty Morgan. I work for the Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service here in Wise County as the Ag and Natural Resources Agent. Love horticulture, so I'm doing this garden series to help you with your gardening. Today we're going to be talking about harvesting, handling, and storing your vegetables. This is what we do it for. Okay, well I thought I'd throw in some of these funny garden sayings, and you can read them. But I like gardening is cheaper than therapy, and you get tomatoes. You can bury a lot of troubles digging in the dirt. So God made rainy days so gardeners could get the housework done. All good sayings and all true. Well, let's talk about gathering the harvest. To help ensure that the vegetables you grow are of high quality. You need to harvest them when they're at peak maturity. Tomatoes, sometimes we pull a little green just to keep the birds and the worms from getting them. But most of these vegetables, we can harvest them when they're mature, and sometimes that's just a guess. And sometimes we just got to try one to see if they're ready. Even after you pull the vegetable, just like tomatoes, you can pull them a little green and put them in the windowsill, and they'll continue to ripen. And a few of the vegetables will do that. Some won't, but anyway, if the vegetables are mature at harvest, the life processes need to be slowed by chilling them. So if you pull them a little green, then yes, you can leave them out. But if you pull them when they're mature and ripe, then you need to put them in the ice box. All right, if they're immature, then just store them at room temperature. Okay, gathering the harvest. Except for ripening, storage does not improve a vegetable's quality. Uh, so a vegetable, has got to be cultivated properly and of good quality at harvest. We can't make it taste any better by letting it ripen any longer. Matter of fact, sometimes it goes the other way. But it can be difficult to determine when vegetables, are mature. So the first step is to record the cultivars that you planted and the dates that were planted. And, on another slide, planting the garden, I believe I told about the early maturing, the mid maturing, and the late maturing. So that's kind of a little guide you can go by to help you determine when, within a certain time frame, when the vegetables are mature or ripe, as I like to say. But some vegetables are more prone to damage, during harvesting, so you got to be careful not to bruise or cut those. Tomatoes are real sensitive, bruise real easy, uh, so just be careful with them. Discard any vegetables that have signs of decay or rot, and if you leave one in there, you've heard that there's always a bad apple in the bunch, but if you have one that's rotten, whatever, in with the good ones, they could be affected also. Some vegetables should be washed in cold running water immediately after they're harvested to remove any soil dust or other contaminants and to help lower their temperature, especially if it's hot outside. Okay, there's three keys to protecting the quality of your produce after harvest. The first one we're going to talk about is temperature. You know, uh, Things such as peas, sweet corn, they convert sugar to starch whenever you interrupt the harvest. So need to worry about the temperature. That helps slow it or speed it up. To minimize this conversion, the produce must be cooled immediately. And if it's possible, harvest these vegetables early in the morning or right before you intend to use them or store them. Okay, another key to protecting the quality of your vegetables is moisture. The proper humidity level when you store them. Leafy type vegetables like lettuce and cabbage and whatnot uh, need to be stored in a high humidity area, and that's why we have our crispers in our ice boxes, the bottom drawers with the holes in them. You can adjust it. While the onions, they can be stored in drier conditions. Onions, potatoes, where it's 65 to 70% relative humidity. The other one is ventilation. Want to make sure that we have enough air going through our vegetables if they need it. This will minimize wilting, and it also minimizes tissue breakdown. So, proper air circulation is very important. Recommendations for a high quality harvest. We'll talk about several vegetables. We'll start with asparagus. We want to cut it just below the soil line where the shoots are about 6 to 8 inches tall. The stalks should be fresh and firm with compact closed tips. So you want the tips of the plant closed. Angular or flat stalks are apt to be woody, so we don't want that. We want it fresh and we want it as tender as possible. I've never ate any that I liked, but my daughter loves them. So anyway, it's your own personal preference, what you like, and we want to store asparagus in the refrigerator and wash it just before we use it. All right, recommendations for high quality harvest on the beans. We have broad beans, lima beans, green shell, all kinds of beans. We want to harvest these beans when the pods are full and hadn't begun to yellow. So, the more yellow they are, the more ripe they are. So, harvest them, when they're just starting to turn yellow. Just have a little yellow tint to them, and that's the best time to harvest those. Keep the beans cold and humid, and use them as soon as you can. We used to have a pea shelling party at my grandmother's when I was young, and don't tell you how many black-eyed peas I've shelled, but really good eating. I love black-eyed peas, and so it's worth the effort. All right, beans, the snap beans. For maximum tenderness, we want to harvest these when they're fully mature. The greener you harvest them, the tougher they're going to be, although you can sometimes cook that out of them, but harvest when the pods are almost full size, before the seeds begin to bulge, in the pods. Beans should be free from scars and strings, when you snap them. Nobody likes to eat a snap. Keep the beans cold, about 45 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit, and also humid, and also use them as soon as possible. You'll hear that a lot during this presentation. Most produce won't keep very long, doesn't have a very long shelf life, so we need to use it as soon as possible, or can it, or freeze it, some method of storing it. Wash the beans before storage, just to help retain their moisture content. All right, beets. We'll pull early beets when they're about 2 inches in diameter. If they're allowed to get any larger than that, they become woody, so we don't want that, especially when it's warm, dry weather. For late crops beets, you want to remove all of them about an inch and a half of the tops. Wash and refrigerate them immediately. All right, broccoli. We want to harvest our broccoli when the flower heads are fully developed. You get the most out of it that way. You can harvest it earlier if you like them a little young and tender, more tender. The individual flower buds open enough to show the bright yellow flowers. That's a sign. Cut them off at 6 to 7 inches below the flower heads. The small tender leaves are also edible and nutritious, so don't forget those. A lot of people just cut all that off. Store harvested broccoli in a cold drawer of the refrigerator, that crisper drawer that we've been talking about. All right, Brussels sprouts. Used to hate these when I was a kid growing up, but I kind of like them now. Harvest these sprouts or buds at the base of the plant when they become solid. Remove the buds higher on the plant as they become firm. So they usually mature. They start at the bottom and go up. So don't strip any leaves from the plants since they're needed for further growth. They will put on more. Store the sprouts in the cold section of the refrigerator. All right, we'll talk about cabbage. Harvest cabbage when the head becomes solid and firm. You can harvest it earlier. That's the way you like it, but you don't get near as much. The outer leaves should be uniform green or purple, depending on the type. Uh, Excessive water uptake by plant roots causes splitting. We're done with that. Prevent material heads from splitting. You can twist the plants enough to break several roots. So that helps. And you want to store the harvested cabbage in the crisper of your ice box and use it within a week or two. Carrots, they're ready to harvest when they're small and succulent. Don't let them get over about an inch in diameter. They get kind of woody then. Pull the largest carrots in the row first. You can remove the tops and wash the carrots before taking them to the fridge. So a lot of people like carrots, and I like to pull them when they're about a half inch to 3/4 inch. Seem to be the best time to harvest them. Cauliflower, harvested when the curds or the aborted flower heads are full size, 6 to 8 inches, but they're still compact, white, and smooth. The curds exposed to the sunlight appear rough, coarse, and cream colored, so those are going to be a little tougher. Not woody, but just tougher. When the head is 3 to 4 inches across, loosely tie the tips of the outer leaves above the curd to exclude the sunlight. Cauliflower, use it immediately after harvest. It doesn't store very well. Corn, everybody loves their sweet corn. So corn, we watch for signs of ripeness to harvest it. We don't want to get too soon because the kernels won't be completely filled out or done growing or to its peak. So when the corn silk darkens and dries out, most time that's a good sign that the ears are mature. Can be fooled every now and then, but that's usually a good sign. When that silk, you can see it on the end of the corn cob or the corn ear. You can see that silk when it starts to dry out and darken, then it's probably time to think about picking it. The kernels fell out toward the top. This ends up uh, become more rounded instead of pointed. Pick sweet corn in the milk stage when the milk-like juice, when you can push them kernels and you crush them with your thumbnail and you get a little juice out of them. That's the best time to pick them. Corn, converts sugar to starch, and it does it pretty pronto. So cook, eat, and chill it immediately after harvest, or store it. I put mine in a freezer bag. Put me 5 or 6 ears of corn in there. Fill it with water just enough to cover the corn. Seal it and put it in the freezer, setting up where it'll cover all the corn and you don't get any freezer burn that way. It's just about, it's not quite as good as it is fresh, but it sure does keep it fresh that way. So it's a great way to store sweet corn in your freezer for later use. Everybody loves roasted corn on the cob. All right, cucumbers. This is what we make a lot of pickles out of. I love pickles. So when the fruits are bright, firm, and green, and before they get too large, we don't want to get them too large because they get kind of tough and a little bit woody. And so the rule of thumb, if you want to make sweet pickles, harvest them about 1.5 to 2 inches long. If you want to make dill pickles, 3 to 4 inches long. And make sure they're bright green and they'll be less crisp. Avoid yellowed cucumbers. We always just pick those and throw them outside of the garden. They're not any good. You can store cucumbers in the refrigerator for about 5 to 7 days. Do not try to pickle salad type cucumbers. My mother used to put up jars of these. Just for weeks. She would can pickles, even made those pickles in the brine in the crocks, the old crocks they used to have. You can put pickles in there and add a mixture, and it's a brine, and uh, well, I can still smell it and still taste them. Really good stuff. Okay, well, all kinds of cucumbers, but make some pickles. Greens. There are many things, many kinds of greens. You know, we have our collard greens, our mustard greens, beet greens, kale greens, Swiss chard, turnip greens, a lot of different kinds of greens. And I used to hate these too. Most kids do. But I'll tell you what, when you get a little older, 40, 50, you taste buds start changing or something happens. And I kind of like greens, especially greens and cornbread. Break off the outer leaves when they are about 6 to 10 inches long and before they start to yellow. Avoid wilted or flabby leaves. You know, throw those away. Wash and chill the leaves immediately, and they'll keep in the ice box. You know, uh, usually 5 to 7 days, but I'd use them sooner than that. And you can just pick what you need. You don't have to pick them all. Just pick them as you know before they yellow. Lettuce. To harvest leaf lettuce, the leaf varieties of lettuce, when the outer older leaves are 4 to 6 inches long. You know, there's all kinds of lettuce too. Got romaine lettuce, got iceberg lettuce, uh, all different types of lettuce that you can grow. Nothing better to me than fresh lettuce, and that's before it makes the head. So if you like that, we'll harvest that, you know, then. If you want to let it make a head, then make sure they're firm, just like cabbage. Uh, the older outer leaves, you know, probably going to have to remove them. And as soon as the leaves are 4 to 6 inches long, then probably ready to pick. But just make sure the head's firm. New leaves provide a continuous harvest of tender, fresh, tasty lettuce until hot weather starts coming on. Then it starts getting more better, and the seed stalks start coming on. So after you harvest it, you know, wash your lettuce, store it in the refrigerator. Washing it, you know, just kind of helps regulate the temperature, and it'll last a little longer if you'll wash it immediately after you harvest it instead of waiting. You know, you can harvest it and put it in the ice box and then wash it before you use it, but it's not going to last near as long if you wash it before you put it in the refrigerator right after harvest. Okra, this stuff will grow anywhere. I think my dad always said it'll grow on a rock. So tough stuff. For optimum quality, you know, you need to harvest okra when it's 3 to 4 inches long. Uh, if you're not sure, we always took our pocket knife and just kind of cut into it. And if it was tough to cut into, we threw that one away. If it went right in, if the knife blade went right in, then keep it. And if you do that, though, you're going to have to uh, harvest it or take it in the house and process it right away most of the time because you've already cut into it and started the rotting process. But harvest these pods before they reach a hollow, puffy stage, and while they're easy to break or cut away from the stalk. The pocket knife test or any kind of knife, is the best test, I think, especially if you're in doubt. So you can tell, you know, when you squeeze it, squeeze that pod, then you can tell if it's tender, if it's tough, and most of the time without a knife. But I don't know. I just like using a knife. Uh, Pick okra every day or two because it matures relatively fast, and there's really no good way to keep that stuff from itching you. Uh, my mom and dad always used to give us socks. We put socks on our arms, and it helps. But I'll tell you what, that stuff is sure enough itchy. Uh, One thing I have found that works pretty good is artificial insemination gloves or palpation gloves that we use in the cattle business. Uh, Works pretty good. They're shoulder length, and you can put them on and clip them up there to your shirt or something on each arm, and uh, works pretty good. I don't itch much when I do it that way. And we want to chill the okra immediately. Put it in the ice box. The best thing to do is just go ahead and process it. Pick it pick it one day when you have time to process it. And we don't like to pick it because it itches. And if you're tough enough to do it barehanded, then more power to you. Okay, let's talk about one of my favorite vegetables, onions. And the ideal bulb, if you want to pick them when they're mature, is about 2 to 4 inches in diameter. So pull all onions when the top falls over. That's the sign that they're ready and done and ready. Remove any adhering dirt. Don't harvest onions when the soil is wet because it'll stick to them. You have more trouble getting it off. Harvest the onions dry for a day or two with the tops on, and then clip 1 inch above the bulb before storing them in a cool, dry place. Onions and potatoes are something that we can store in a cool, dry place in the barn, or Dad always used to make a tarp in the barn and stretch it out off the ground, and he would put potatoes, and we put our potatoes and onions there, and they'll keep all fall and winter and into the next spring, really. If you want to harvest the green onions, do that when they're 6 to 8 inches tall. And what I always like to do is like to plant my onions pretty thick, and then as they start to mature and get a little bigger, when they get about 3/4 inch, I'll go out there and I'll pick every other one, and you can have them with your meals or make a fresh salad out of them. Really good that way, and a lot of people buy them at the store that way, but there's nothing like a fresh onion pulled right out of the garden. All right, talk about peas. Like I mentioned before, I've shelled my share of black-eyed crowder peas, purple hulls. Uh, you want to harvest those pods when they're green and shiny and fully developed. Overly mature peas are poor quality, so we don't want those. But you know what? If you cook them in a crock pot, you probably not going to notice the difference. The edible potted varieties such as snow or Chinese peas, you can harvest those when the pods are fully developed, about 3 inches long, and before the seeds are more than half developed. So, and you can make snap beans out of the pods that are not developed quite enough to shell them. So there's really no throwaways except for the snaps and the strings. After harvest, peas are going to deteriorate rapidly at high temperature, so wash and chill them immediately. You can also process these too, whether you can them or whether you freeze them, or whether you just dry them out and keep them that way. Love peas. They're a really good vegetable. Okay, let's talk about peppers. Probably my third favorite vegetable in the garden behind onions, tomatoes. We want to harvest our peppers when they're 4 to 5 inches long, when they have a full, well-formed lobe. Immature peppers, they're pale, soft, pliable to the touch. They're thin flesh, so if you grab a hold of a pepper and it's pliable, you can tell if it's kind of squishy. It's not ready yet. Let it get a little harder, get a little more maturity on it, and then it'll be ready to pick. Just cause the peppers turn orange or red don't mean it gets any hotter. I don't know. I kind of beg to differ on that on jalapenos, but it seemed like the more closer to our past maturity they get, to me, my experience has been they get a little hotter. But store the harvest peppers between 45 and 50 degrees in your refrigerator, and they'll keep a good while. I've had peppers last up to 10 or 12 days or more in the ice box. But try to eat them when no more than 5 or 7 days old. We have all kinds of peppers. We mentioned the jalapenos and the banana peppers, have the Anaheims. That one there in the bottom middle is the Carolina Reaper. I tell you what, it's pretty hot, pretty hot. And then of course got the bell pepper up there. But there's a lot of different. There's so many different hot peppers now that you can't even eat a bite of the hot sauce made with them. It's just to make you break out in sweat. Okay, so let's talk about potatoes. You can't go wrong with potatoes, right? Irish and new. For the Irish potatoes, a good harvest size is 2 to 3 inches in diameter. It's an individual preference. You can dig them at any size. for the new potatoes, the size you want them about 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches in diameter. Let the potatoes, after you dig them, dry several hours in the garden. That helps you get the dirt away from them when you get ready to store them. Don't expose the potatoes to sunlight for very long. Sunlight starts to deteriorate them rapidly, so you want to remove all the soil on them, but don't wash them before you store them, because that's going to cause a reaction. It's going to make them mature faster. So don't wash them, just get them clean enough. You can always clean them before you use them. And like I said, store those potatoes in a cool, dry area. Uh, you know, the ideal place is the basement. So if you don't have that, then you can figure something out. I was talking about squash, harvesting squash. When it's 4 to 6 inches long, if it's a yellow crookneck squash, uh, 6 to 8 inches long for yellow straight neck, and 3 to 4 inches in diameter for the white scallop. And a glossy color on it indicates tenderness. You can also do the knife test on these squash. You can squeeze them. If they're a little mushy, but firm, then they're probably ready to harvest. If they're real hard, then you might want to run your knife into them and see how hard they are. I mean, yeah, you can parboil the more mature ones, the over mature ones, but they're not going to be near as good and taste near as good. All right, harvest the winter squash when the fruits are full size. The rind, the outside is the firm and glossy, and the bottom portion touching the soil of the fruit is cream to orange colored. A light frost is not going to hurt your mature fruit. So if you have a fall garden, you're harvesting squash, then the frost usually won't damage it too much. All right, because squash, like the cucumbers, are susceptible to chilling injury. Don't store them at cold temperatures for more than 2 or 3 days. So try to use them soon, or process them as soon as you can. I'm not a big fan of boiled squash. I will eat it, but I love fried squash. All right, sweet potatoes. Harvest sweet potatoes late in the fall before the early frost hits. Lift the sweet potatoes to avoid cuts, bruises, and broken roots, and take all the soil off of them, but don't wash them again. You want to cure them for about 14 days in a warm, well-ventilated location. Then you want to store them in a cool, dry place with your other Irish potatoes and new potatoes. And potatoes are good. Sweet potatoes are good for you. You can fix them in so many different ways. All right, let's talk about tomatoes, my second favorite vegetable. Harvest tomatoes when they're fully colored, still firm. Red tomatoes for eating fresh, cooking, or canning. Don't overripe the tomatoes. They start getting more acid taste to them when you overripe tomatoes. So if necessary, pick mature green or slightly pink tomatoes and ripen them at room temperature out of direct sunlight. I don't like to do that. If you have trouble with birds poking holes in them or eating half of them or whatever, or if you have trouble with worms, or squirrels, put nets over your tomatoes. I mean, you can put nets over them, and they're pretty easy to lift up and pick your tomatoes. But I'll tell you what, the best tomato you're going to eat is the one that's ripe at the right stage of maturity. If they're too green and you put them in, let them ripen, yeah, they taste okay. If they're too ripe, they're more acidy tasted. So on your tomatoes, pick them when they're mature, when they're at the right stage to get the maximum satisfying taste out of them. It might be a little work to put that netting over them to keep the birds and the squirrels and whatever out of them, but it'll be worth it. When you when you harvest the tomatoes, take them inside, use them within a few days, or process them, make hot sauce or whatever out of them, tomato sauce. But tomatoes, a great vegetable used in so many ways, even ketchup. And yeah, they're the best garden vegetable ever, right behind onions. All right, turnips. Harvest turnips and the roots are 1.5 to 2 inches in diameter, and before the fall frost, because it's gonna get them. Harvest the leaves 6 to 8 inches in length. Keep the top turnips cold and humid. And you either love them or you hate them, and I don't like them at all. So good luck with your garden and enjoy your produce. That's one of the major reasons we plant a garden is one is to have fun, work in the garden. It's a good relaxation. It's just fun watching stuff grow. But the most fun that we have is harvesting it, sharing it with our neighbors, sharing it with your friends and family. My dad always had a 2 acre garden, and we had enough for us to eat fresh, can, and to give to all the neighbors, and he'd take it to town and pass it out to all the old widow women or all the old folks. So gardening is fun, and just enjoy it. All right, so here's some helpful resources for you. It's the Aggie-Horticulture website. Go to the home page, click on the tabs you need to know something about, and get after it. It's got a lot of really great material there, from vegetable guides all the way through gardening, lawn, how to grow organic vegetables. Really good source for all gardeners and lawn, and there's just all kinds of useful information there. So check it out. And we thank you for joining us today, and I hope you enjoy your harvest on your garden and all your produce that you make, and uh, just have fun. Enjoy eating. And we'll see you next time on Garden Wise.